everyone, it's Sid from Cool Moviegram here, your source for everything about cool movies. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for further content. Today we are doing a retrospective of the Young and Dangerous series, which comprises of 7 films, one of which is a prequel. They were released between the years 1996 and 2000. The genre is crime drama gangster. They're Hong Kong films directed by Andrew Lau. The cast is Ekin Cheng as Chan Ho Nam, Jordan Chan as Sankai, aka Chicken, Jerry Lam as Bao Pei, Michael T as Tin Yi, Jason Chu as Chow Pei, or Banana Skin in Young and Dangerous 2 to 5, based on a popular comic strip called Guwak Jai, which means teddy boy or rascal, a term in Cantonese which is used to describe someone who's part of a triad. And the film follows 5 best friends who grow up on a housing estate, who join a triad, and then we get to just see their journey through organized crime, experiencing highs, lows, love, grief, and everything in between. Let's get started with the rundown of each film. The first installment opens with a blurb which explains that there was a massive fire in the 1950s in Hong Kong, which left thousands of Hong Kong residents homeless. So the government decided to build high-rise apartment blocks, which led to thousands of families living in cramped conditions. Not many people were rich, and the area became a breeding ground for crime and gangs. And we pick up with our main heroes as teenagers in 1985, where Chan Ho Nam, Chicken and the boys run afoul of local gangster Ugly Kwan, played by the amazing Francis Ng. This shortly leads to a beating, but then in order to prevent any further bullying or harassment from gangs, the boys decide to follow Uncle B, who's also a member of the Hong Hing Triad. So they join the triad to save themselves. And Ng Chi Hung, who plays Uncle B, who's a kind-hearted gang boss, the actor was actually a triad in real life before becoming an actor, and he was also a consultant on a lot of these films. Flash forward to 1995, where we see the protagonist and his friends are all grown men. They're fully fledged triad members, doing things like carrying out hits, beefing with other gangs, and also running afoul of Ugly Kwan once again. Following a botched hit in Macau, which leaves Chow Pei dead and the Brotherhood in ruins, Ugly Kwan decides to take advantage and use this to conspire and take power over the whole triad by removing charismatic triad Don Mr. Chang, played by the reliable Simon Yam. And since Ho Nam had actually broken triad law, he's expelled. Once Uncle B has been murdered and Ho Nam finds out the truth, the boys decide to put aside their difference. So Ho Nam, Chicken, and the rest decide to get together and get revenge. Now, picking up after the events of the first movie, Young and Dangerous 2 sees Chan Ho Nam back in the Hong Hing Triad. And he has opened a bar with his best friend Chicken. And then we learn about Chicken's exploits in Taiwan, which took place after the Macau incident in the first movie. Chicken has joined the San Lun Triad with his cousin Darky, played by the late actor and stuntman Blackie Cole. And there we see him working up the ranks and also getting involved with the boss, Mr. Lui, and also his mistress, Ding Yu, played by Ching Mi Yao. Then we pick up with Chan Ho Nam with the current times of the film, which is in about 96, where we see that he's actually facing rivalry from a sleazy mobster named Tai Fei, played by the legendary Anthony Wong, in order to take over from Uncle B to be the boss of Causeway Bay for Hung Hing. Tensions rise as Ho Nam's girlfriend Smarty is left in a coma after a botched hit against him, and the San Lun Triad from Taiwan is trying to muscle in on Hung Hing Triad's gambling ventures, which kind of puts Chicken in a weird place where he has to prove his loyalty to his friends that he's grown up with. We catch up with the boys of Causeway Bay, as Honam is now the boss of that district, and he is actually moving up the ranks of the triad. His love interest Smarty has woken up from the coma, but she has amnesia. Meanwhile, Tung Sing gang boss, Mr. Locke, played by the Triad movie regular Chan Wai Man, who was also a former Triad, has moved back to Hong Kong from Holland and wants to live a nice, peaceful life, relaxed, retire with ease. But his right-hand men, played by Roy Chung as the character Crow, and Tiger, played by Ji Hung, reincarnated, who actually played Uncle B in the first movie. They have other plans. They start stepping on the toes of the Hung Hing Triad, and also go as far as framing Ho Nam for the murder of Mr. Chang. And this starts off an all-out war between the two gangs, and Ho Nam is also a wanted man by his own triad. The movie opens with Tin Yi marrying Tai Fei's sister KK. Ho Nam is in mourning for the loss of his girlfriend Smarty. Then the boys and the gang and all the figureheads of the triad decide to head to Bangkok, where they meet Mr. Chang's brother, the other Mr. Chang, played by Alex Mann, who is asked to take over the triads following his brother's death in the last movie. We meet some new characters. Sister 13, who's kind of like a lesbian, bisexual gang boss of Hong Hing from Portland Street. And also Hon Bun, played by Wang Yungming, who also manages another district in Hong Kong for the Hong Hing. Hon Bun's brother who's a gang boss in the Tuen Mun district. He's actually killed by Yu Yung, who belongs to the Tung Sing Triad, and is played by Roy Chung, reincarnated. Yep, he played Crow in the previous movies. This time around, he's playing Yu Yung. And this kind of like opens up a new position for aspiring triad gangsters, saying that, we've lost someone, we need someone to actually take over. So Chicken decides to take up the challenge, and he is rivaling against a man named Barbarian, who's played by the guy who Chow Yun-fat shoots in the tea house in A Better Tomorrow. And they have a very unethical kind of like battle going on in between them. And the stakes are kind of like really high between them. Chan Ho Nam is getting involved with a beautiful school teacher played by the gorgeous Michelle Race, who is unaware of his gangster lifestyle. Once again, Ho Nam is at loggerheads with the Tung Sing Triad, only this time it's a new boss called Zito Ho Nam, played by Mark Ching. Whilst this is all going on, Chan Ho Nam reconnects with a former coal triad named Big Head, played by Chin Ka Lok, who has come out of prison and now is living a quiet life running a small newspaper stand. He decides to rejoin the triad after getting bullied by the Tung Sing boys on more than one occasion. And whilst all that happens, a shady property developer from Malaysia, played by Paul Chun, is trying to strike a suspicious deal with Chan Ho Nam. And a new police officer is assigned to Wan Chai Causeway Bay, played by the man who plays cops, Danny Lee, who is looking to pacify triad activity within the district. Young and Dangerous prequel takes place in the late 80s, where we see Ho Nam, played by Nicholas Chi, in his first role, and Sam Lee plays Chicken, and they're kicked out of school and eventually have no other place to go, feeling lost, and with no help or no other any avenue of surviving, they decide to join the Hung Hing Triad. And we see them kind of working their way from the rock bottom and having to make their bones, and the decisions they make that actually change, or the decisions that actually shape their lives that are to come. We see Chan Ho Lam getting involved with another girl who's played by Shu Qi, but this time she's not playing the same character that she played in Young and Dangerous 5, yet she is playing the girlfriend of Big Head, who's played by Daniel Wu. The final installment, Born to be King, starts off where Chicken is betrothed to Nanako, played by Anya Wu, who's the daughter of Ichio Kusakari, played by the late legend Sonny Chiba, who had just passed away earlier on this year, who in an arrangement between the Taiwanese Sanlun triad and the Kusakari clan Yakuza from Japan. Meanwhile, the new boss, Mr. Chang, decides to retire from triad life, and Chan Ho Lam is now appointed the head of the Hung Hing. So he's gone from being just the boss of the Causeway Bay district, but now he's the Don, the head of the whole triad. So he's like the new Michael Corleone or something. Well, more or less. Well, he's now the Michael Corleone of the triad. In the midst of all this, Kusakari's adopted son Akira, played by Roy Chung, reincarnated for another time, and the deceased Sanlun triad boss, Mr. Lui's son Lui Fung Kwan, played by Peter Ho, are conspiring to usurp power in their own gangs, whilst political pressure is mounting from mainland China, who's looking to move in on the gangs. The series of films were a breath of fresh air, establishing a more gritty, street-level, realistic type of gangster film, in contrast to the more stylized, slick movies that we saw being made by John Woo and the heroic bloodshed genre in general. These films were also made on a relatively smaller budget in comparison to other triad movies that were made in the past. I mean, these are the films that literally kind of like bumped up the triad genre again. Considering after John Woo had left, the triad movies have kind of like started dying down in the early 90s, late 80s, but then in the late 90s, these came about. The Young and Dangerous movies kind of started a boom of triad genres, like the street level triad movies, and many of them were also funded by actual triad money as well. The first three films are by far the highlights of the franchise. Leading man Ekin Cheng is somewhat convincing as Chan Ho Nam, as usually he's referred to by most Hong Kong moviegoers as the accidental movie star, often criticized for his wooden performances in other movies. But over here, we get to see him portray a gangster, and he has the right mindset of a gangster, displaying the kind of values of brotherhood, loyalty, and discipline and leadership throughout the whole kind of like throughout the series. The standout star has to be Jordan Chan, who plays his best friend Chicken, who's like a lustful, fun-loving, carefree man who goes through a journey that makes him a a stand-up, respectable, disciplined gangster. The films are peppered with great performances from the supporting cast. Veteran actor Spencer Lamb plays a former criminal turned priest who kind of serves as a moral compass for the boys. The love interests are played by screen siren Gigi Lai as Smarty, who's a streetwise girl who usually just isn't taken seriously because of a speech impediment. And she has good comic timing and is able to kind of like also bring out a very humane, relatable, more gentle side to Honam, given their natural chemistry. Karen Mock plays Wasabi, who's the priest's wayward daughter and Chicken's love interest in Young and Dangerous 3 and 4. And she's more a fun-loving, carefree, foul-mouthed badass and pretty much a match made in heaven for Chicken. The usually entertaining sex symbol, Ching Mi Yao, is rather dull and plain in the second installment. Her change in personality was rather unconvincing, which considering how she usually lights up the screen with her presence and her looks in other movies. The villains are in top form for the first 3 films. Francis Ng brings a sleazy, manipulative menace to Ugly Kwan. And, he's the kind of antagonist you'd love to hate. Yet he brings a unique comedic quality to the role. So just shows his versatile range just in this one role. And Anthony Wong, he plays the, sleazy, temperamental Tai Fei with ease, starting off as a villain in Young and Dangerous 2, and then from Young and Dangerous 3, 4, and also a bit of 5, he's more of like a supporting, comical, comedic type of character. Again, Ching Mi Yao is quite stiff and not very convincing as a villain in the second half of Young and Dangerous 2, but Roy Chung's Crow in Young and Dangerous 3 is by far possibly the most crazy and most villainous bad guy of all. He's unethical, he's aggressive, violent, and just someone who just loves to be bad for the sake of being bad. The style and even the substance of of the first 3 is just enough to get the audiences invested in this franchise. The action sequences are like giant scraps with the cast using metal pipes, blunt objects like hockey sticks and even fish cleavers, and they're not as like carefully choreographed as most martial arts and Hong Kong action movies. There's no there's not like really any stylized shootouts. It just all seems realistic and believable. Like pretty much this is how you would expect a lot of these street level triad gangs to actually sort out their fights. They wouldn't use really kind of like blast 2 guns like Chow Yun Fat in John Woo movies. This is people just literally just going in for the kill with whatever object they could find. The cinematography is great. It's harking back to considering Andrew Lau, who shoots his films as the DOP as well as directing them. You can see a lot of the cinematography harks back to Wong Kar-wai's As Tears Go By, which he was the director of photography, and also when he worked on films such as Ringo Lam's City on Fire. I mean, it captures there's a lot of handheld camera, like following the characters, and also a lot of neon lights in the nightlife of Hong Kong. And that brings out a very kind of like gritty, seedy side, but also a flashy kind of like image of Hong Kong. When it comes to Young and Dangerous 4, the plot was pretty much a rehash of Young and Dangerous 2. Instead of Honam against the Tai Fei character, for the same post, for the same job, they actually got Chicken doing the same thing, but this time against Barbarian. Young and Dangerous 4 also feels like a bit of a rehash of the third one, where you see Yu Young, played by Roy Chung again, who's a Tung Sing triad trying to kind of like scheme and take over their turf. The film still manages to deliver, packed with the same upbeat energy and strong performances from the cast, in particularly where Honam and Chicken have kind of like a breakdown after following a friend's death. And Roy Chung returns as a reincarnated villain, a performance which is obviously inspired by Gary Oldman in Leon the Professional, who's like a murderous psychopath that loves classical music. It was good, but it just kind of felt a bit like it was kind of a bit more theatrical in comparison to the kind of crazy violentness of Crow in Young and Dangerous 3. I mean, both played by the same actor, which kind of seemed a bit weird. Wait a minute, he played the bad guy in the previous movie. Why is he kind of like recast again as a different character? I mean, they don't explain it. I mean, if he's his twin or his brother or what or whatever. I mean, despite its flaws, I mean, it's a pretty fun movie to watch. I mean, Young and Dangerous 4 is pretty much fan service for the Young and Dangerous fans itself. And when Young and Dangerous 5 was released, it was definitely the low point of the series. I mean, the plot, once again, was very much a rehash of the third film. And Jordan Chandler's Chicken and also Karen Mocker's Wasabi were absent. And the remaining cast kind of looked bored in the film. It lacked the same energy that was, present in the previous installments, and the screenplay moved at a snail's pace. I mean, Chin Kar Lok was a good addition as Biggerhead. The final act of the movie, it kind of feels like a Rocky movie, as there's kind of like a build up towards a boxing match. Shu Qi playing the love interest for Honam as Mei Ling is kind of like just meh. Her cuteness just throws the tone of the film into a completely different direction, and almost as if the director was trying to make two movies in one. So the best I could say is it's average at best. The poor reception of the fifth movie, fans, did not like it at all. Andrew Lau had made the prequel. I mean, this is possibly the most character-driven installment of the whole series. Taking over from Ekin Cheng is Nicholas T in his first movie role, and Sam Lee playing Chicken at the age of, and they're playing 17-year-olds, and the film captures the feeling of alienated youth, feeling helpless, as we see them, they're getting kicked out of school and joining the triad, and it just kind of shows a grim reality of gang life. I mean, it's kind of like a cautionary tale. Not everything's kind of like prosperous as it's made out to be. And we kind of saw that life in the original movies, in the first five, but this time around we kind of see a more grim kind of like harsh reality that there is always a price to pay. And although even in the first five films, you saw that there was also a negative consequence when getting involved in the gang life. But this time round, this one's a bit more kind of hard. Even the action is a lot more brutal and bloody than the previous installments. This was a lot more violent. Both the actors, Nicholas Chi and Sam Lee especially, they stood out. They did an absolute amazing job as Honam and Chicken. Nicholas Chi won a Best Newcomer award at the Hong Kong Film Awards for his debut. Then we have the final installment, Born to be King, which picks up with the original cast after the events of the fifth movie. This one has a much different aesthetic, looking much slicker and more stylish in terms of editing and smoother, more polished cinematography. There's a lot of jump cut editing, and a big change is the music score. Instead of the usual kind of like rock heavy score and traditional Hong Kong movie feel, we get a lot of techno type of kind of like music, which is giving it a more updated look. But now if you watch it now, it looks very 2000s. I mean, in a way, it kind of makes the film feel a lot more updated, of course, yeah. But now the main characters seem more grown up, they're sophisticated. An element from Young and Dangerous 5, which is expanded upon, but instead of wearing jeans, leather jackets, and like designer t-shirts and such, the characters are all wearing like tailored suits. And since Honam is the triad leader, he appears to be more mature and leader-like. And I enjoyed Jordan Chan's return as Chicken, as most of the conflict is centered around his character. Even the recurring appearance of Blackie Cole was quite entertaining and humorous as Darky. as the late actor, had great comic timing. He used to be a stuntman. He'd worked with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, but also, in these movies he showed he was actually always quite funny, had good comic timing as well. And talking about conflict, that seems to be a problem because Chan Ho Nam, who's the actual protagonist of all these movies, he's the main character. He always gets top billing. There doesn't seem to be much of a conflict involving his character, as most of the focus of that is on Chicken. And the only thing that happens with him is that he's a doppelganger of his deceased girlfriend, who's also played by Gigi Lai, who's a school teacher, and it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. And Shuchi also returns as Mei Ling, overly perky and annoying as she was in the fifth movie, and these elements just seem kind of like rather pointless. The bad guys, they seem to be too tame and uninteresting. I mean, Peter Ho's performance as Lui Fu Quan is just more smarmy than sinister and intimidating as the previous bad guys. It's just annoying. And Roy Chung's kind of more subtle, more controlled kind of performance as Akira. I'm thinking that this guy, he's been kind of cast as three different roles throughout each kind of, throughout the series of the films. I'm thinking this role could have gone to any other actor. They didn't have to kind of just reincarnate and reuse. I mean, I know he's a good actor, but the fact is it could have been a lot of other character actors that work in Hong Kong that could have done probably just as good as well. I mean, I do like Roy Chung. There's nothing wrong with the guy, but I just think it was kind of weird and kind of strange watching an actor that was kind of like the character kind of like meets their end in one movie, but then all of a sudden they're reincarnated to play a different character, the same actor. It's just a bit like, that was one of the gripes that I had. My rating for these films is as follows. Young and Dangerous, 4 stars out of 5. Young and Dangerous 2, 4 stars out of 5. Young and Dangerous 3, 4 stars out of 5. Young and Dangerous 4, 3.5 stars out of 5. Young and Dangerous 5, 2.5 out of 5. Young and Dangerous the prequel, 4 out of 5. Born to be King, aka Young and Dangerous 6, 3 out of 5. For ranking them in order of preference, it would be Young and Dangerous 3, Young and Dangerous 1, Young and Dangerous 2, Young and Dangerous the prequel, Young and Dangerous 4, Born to be King, and Young and Dangerous 5. Not perfect, and possibly not the best in the triad genre. Despite the shortcomings, there's a lot to be entertained by, especially the first 4, I would say, are pretty solid, entertaining movies. And I would recommend these films based on their significance and the impact that they had on late 90s Hong Kong cinema. Be sure to also follow me on Instagram, and if you've seen these films, tell me what you think of them. And if there's any other similar triad movies that you may have seen that came out, I've seen plenty that came out around about that time. I've seen loads. Which ones would you think were good ones? Which ones were not so good? And what you're kind of like, how would you rank the series of films the way I have?